first meeting of the Environmental Services and Regulation Committee. Anybody saying waste and street scene will need to make a contribution to the tuck shop of either a marathon or a packet of opal fruits. We had intended to live cast this meeting. Unfortunately it's not working for technical reasons. It will be recorded and it will be available for the recording to be viewed after the meeting. The meeting today is open to the public and we do not have any items that require the public to be excluded. We have received 1 petition, 4 questions and 2 statements and 1 question from a member. Can I request mobile phones and other such equipment are switched to silent so as not to disturb the conduct of the meeting? There is no fire test planned for today. If there is an emergency evacuation, please take instruction from the Town Hall staff. The assembly point is to the square. Right, so let's have introductions. So I'm Councillor Joe Otten, I'm chair of this committee. Mark?
Councillor Mark Russing, deputy chair of the committee, and councillor for Shire Green and Brightside.
Good morning, I'm Councillor Mike Chaplin. I represent Southey Ward and I'm a substitute member on this committee.
Good morning, David Barker, councillor for Richmond Ward.
Councillor Mary Lee for Darnell Ward.
Councillor Peter Gilbert for Ecclesall Ward.
Good morning, I'm Christine Gilligan. I'm a councillor in Hillsborough Ward and I'm also a spokesperson on this committee.
Morning, Councillor Sophie Crossthorne for Beechiff and Greenall Ward, substituting for Councillor Mohammed today.
Councillor Sue Alston, councillor for Fulwood.
Thank you. And officers?
Good morning, I'm an officer, Assistant Director for Legal Services, Robert Parkin.
Morning, Samantha Bond, Licensing and Prosecutions Lawyer.
Morning, Richard Eyre, Director of Street Scene and Regulations.
Amanda Clayton, Democratic Services.
Thank you. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillor Shafat Mohammed and Councillor Mark Jones, and we have substitutes attending today on behalf of those two.
Thank you. Exclusion of press and public, as mentioned above. Declarations of interest. Are there any members wishing to declare an interest? No. Minutes of the previous meeting, page 11 of the agenda pack. Can we agree those as a correct record? I'm hearing nothing. Okay, that's agreed. Correct record. Item 5, public petitions, questions and statements. So if we go first to the petition, which is from Ibra. Do you want to come and present your petition, please?
Is that working? Thank you, Chair. Just for the record purpose, I do want this to be on the record. I am going to make a complaint as well that we have been put up here in the public gallery when in the past we were welcomed at the front with yourselves to contribute to debate. I think that's much more welcoming and in a way that it conduces the whole process. So that's for the record purposes on the record. As for the petition, my petition is very clear that we object to the permanent door signage. We feel that there is no evidence to prove that we need a permanent door signage on private hire vehicles. Over the number of years since we've had door signage, and even as a door signage, drivers' vehicles have been attacked across the city. And in the previous 6 months to a year, you have been sent images showing evidence of where there was a door signage on a vehicle, they were attacked as a private hire vehicle for all different kinds of reasons, motivated, might be racial, might be vehicles that got a signage which is very easy to identify. The DFT guidance is very clear as well, and if council follows that, it doesn't say that it has to be permanent door signage. Many of the cities across the country are now removing door signage. What constitutes a private hire vehicle is it has a rear license plate. That is the only thing it constitutes a private hire license vehicle, to have a license at the vehicle, which can be at the rear and some councils have it at the front, but Sheffield has a policy of rear, which I totally agree with and support, that the licence is at the rear, and that's it. The driver needs to be licensed, the vehicle is licensed. So, in a nutshell, that is one reason. The other reason is that in a scenario where we have now, Chair, with your attention, is that we have vehicles licensed in Calderdale and Wolverhampton, working with a Sheffield private hire operator, no door signage. Then we have Sheffield licensed vehicles working with the Sheffield operator, door signage. Same customer, same operator, two rules. One for Sheffield private hire is very different, and one for the subcontracting operator licensed vehicle working with the same operator, whether it's Vizu or Uber or whoever, who have got a triple license in a sense, is different. So why is Sheffield driver at disadvantage? I think you need to look very urgently at the private hire operator license conditions, and that needs to be instructed from this committee, because if you're going to have a level playing field, then that has to be fair to Sheffield. Your duty is to protect and safeguard the public of Sheffield. Now, if the customer is same, then why there are two different rules? Because what the consultation you said, or the consultation you had with the disability organisation, with the, all the issues of that, they come out with that there should be signage. Why are cross-border subcontracting vehicles allowed to continue while the Sheffield ones are being restricted, or license conditions are imposed upon them are very restrictive? So I think it's very, very unfair. The other thing is the report, because I was going through the report on this, the report I think is not very well written or confirmed to give a clear guidance on the recommendations. And if you look at recommendations in Appendix D, and then you look at Appendix G, I think Appendix D says permanent door signage, and Appendix G says otherwise. Now, which one am I to read and understand? I think I'll be reading these reports for very long, and this wasn't clear. The other point in this is, Chair, that we did request to officers that before you draft and go into the final submission of public report, as working together as colleagues and as a trade, do talk to the trade reps, so if there are any anomalies, we can address as well. So, Chair, I have a number of questions. When you allow me to come on that, I'll come then, but I think you got the thrust of my concerns. We are totally against door signage, permanent, definite. I think the drivers in the trade don't want any door signage, but the license rear of the vehicle, and we need to work together, and the Appendix D and G needs to be clarity, and out of town you need to address on the private hire operator conditions of license, because we can't have one city, two rules. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ebrard. So your points on the signage, obviously, that's going to be discussed under the item later on in the agenda when that happens. Just to clarify on the point on Appendix D, it does say on page 135 that Appendix D is the proposal that was consulted upon. The proposal we're here to consider is for permanent and not secure signage. So, I take many of your comments as supporting that proposal that we are here to consider. Your point on the out-of-town taxis, I think we all know we've discussed this many times. I'm happy to keep discussing it in a taxi forum. My understanding is that it's still essentially a question for government. We have previously written to the previous government on this. I'm happy to do that again, or we can raise it. Members, I'm sure, can raise through channels. We're happy to keep pressing on that. Okay, thank you. So next we have questions, isn't it? Question one, Rosa Vince, do you want to come and ask your question, please?
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay? All right, hi, I'm Rosa. My question is about the SEV licensing policy. I have a question and a statement, and both are about the relevant locality conditions. So I'm asking what measures will be taken to ensure that the open-ended definition of relevant locality will not be misused. I worry that the council could refuse any SEV licence by choosing to consider an entire city, wards or area or LAC area to be a residential area, for example. This would be unfair, as there is a clear difference between being next door to a venue and being several streets away. To illustrate, the casino on Queen's Road, Duchess Road, the junction between those two roads, exists within a mile of several religious institutions, schools, but it isn't right next door to any of these religious institutions or schools. Given that this location is deemed appropriate for a casino, it would be unfair to deny an SEV licence on the grounds of locality if the SEV was within several miles of similar institutions. Many sports bars, music venues, and gambling establishments are in the city centre, and many people, including myself, are residents in the city centre. We certainly shouldn't shut down the nighttime economy in the city centre, but I worry that the open-ended definition of relevant locality and proximity leaves room for a future committee to hold SEVs to an unfair standard. Can measures be built in to set a reasonable standard here, is my question. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a prepared answer for this, but I must say I do kind of take your point. So rather than just read all of this out, I'll read out some bits of it and comment on it. I think, yes, the documents you have in front of you include an area rationale which has divided the city into seven large areas and made an assessment of that large area, and has concluded on that basis that there isn't anywhere suitable for an SEV. Now, I've queried this approach in the past as well, and I have my doubts that it really stands up. However, that is what we have done, and that is one of the things that is informing this proposal. Just to read a bit out, it is not possible to carry out a street-by-street assessment across the city in order to determine where there may or may not be appropriate for licensing an SEV. It is considered that the discretionary grounds identified above and expanded on Part 7 draft policy provide a detailed analysis in order to guide members, officers, and the public. So I think that's part of the answer to your question. I think that more broadly, you've asked what safeguards there are against this being overinterpreted, and I think that's always a question you can ask of any policy. I think a policy might always be over or underinterpreted, and we have to rely on the committee making a decision to interpret something correctly. I think is the question. If it doesn't, then there obviously always can be legal challenges. So I think this is the nature of the beast that we're engaging with. Is that the committee, the licensing subcommittee, must be careful not to interpret policies correctly. Thank you. Question number 2, Lee Ward. Is Lee here? No. Okay. So Lee's had there's an answer which we provided to Lee in writing. Question number 3, Ibra.
My question? Okay, Chair. I think, have you got a copy of my questions before you? Yeah. Okay, just for public record. 1, the report claims signage will improve consistency for users. How is this justified when thousands of out-of-town private vehicles operate in Sheffield without signage, which I alluded to early on? Has Sheffield City Council conducted a quality impact, public safety or user experience assessment comparing Sheffield licence and out-of-town private vehicle? If not, how was the consistency claim reached? 3, if signage is vital for safety and enforcement, why are out-of-town vehicles without signage allowed in Sheffield bus lanes and private hire vehicles work? Has this been raised with DFT? Over 1,400 signage-related defect notices were issued. Why are these figures so high compared to dangerous defects? Has an audit ruled out targeting? Has a risk, number 5, has a risk assessment been done on private hire vehicle driver safety when signage is displayed off-duty? Why wasn't an off-duty exemption option presented? Number 6, why can't drivers be off-duty without a badge, but vehicles must still display signage? What's the legal basis for this consistency? Number 7, has Sheffield City Council sought legal and insurance advice on signage during private use? Will this be published? 8, was consultation date separated by stakeholders type? Will full responses and internal assessment be published? What duty do Sheffield private hire operators have over non-Sheffield licensed private hire vehicles they operate? Has Sheffield City Council assessed risk of licensees leaving due to these unequal standards? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, answers to your questions. Question 1, Sheffield City Council Licensing Services is responsible for the drivers, vehicles and operators it licenses. Those that are licensed elsewhere operate under conditions specific to that authority. This policy aims to promote consistency to vehicles licensed by Sheffield City Council. 2, an equality impact assessment has been conducted that assesses impacts on licensees and customers alike. Consistency is limited to Sheffield licensed vehicles only. Sheffield City Council has no jurisdiction over vehicles and drivers licensed elsewhere. 3, information received through the consultation from stakeholders such as the Sheffield Safeguarding Partnership and Disability Sheffield highlights the importance of vehicle signage. The ability for out-of-town vehicles to use bus lanes has been answered previously, most recently in response to a question by Mr Ward in the Waston Street Scene Policy Committee meeting on 14th of February 2025. 4, the licensing service is committed to ensuring that all licence holders remain compliant with legislation and local policies and has a range of enforcement options available to support both proactive and reactive enforcement work. The recommended proposals aim to provide clearer advice for licensees, which should hopefully result in a reduction in defect notices for such breaches. 5, the policy recommendation for permanent vehicle signage has been removed following the consultation. It now stipulates that signage must be securely attached, not permanently attached. Therefore, signage can be removed when a vehicle is not working. However, this does not negate the fact the vehicle is and remains licensed and can only be driven by a licensed and appropriately insured driver. 6, or possibly 7. The licensing service has not sought any advice from vehicle insurance companies in relation to this review. The full report, including the recommended proposal, has been signed off by Sheffield City Council Legal Services. 8, a full copy of the consultation results is contained within the report. 9, Sheffield private hire conditions are specific to Sheffield licensed drivers and vehicles must be both reasonable and proportionate. 10, in carrying out this review, Sheffield has sought and followed guidance contained in DFT's best practice. No risk assessment has been undertaken on licensees choosing to become licensed with other licensing authorities in relation to this review. And just on that last point I will add, because the signage requirements are becoming less onerous, I would hope that the traffic would be in the other direction, that drivers licensed elsewhere might choose to be licensed here. Thank you. Question 4, Sally Page.
This is in relation to the SEV. The policy document represents the minimum the council could be doing to understand the present role of sex work in the city. I want to caution against an idea that an SEV would be a corrupting addition to the city, but rather point out that there are already a myriad range of sex work already happening here. The council may have some sense of SEVs and street work, and there may be a temptation to consider all sex work survival sex work. However, there are increasing numbers of diverse people, usually women, who use sex work to top up their incomes, cover basic costs, caring, parenting responsibilities, or indeed creative practices. Sex workers silently make huge contributions to the culture of this city. The council is in danger of never knowing about these lives, stories and contributions without evolving its position. This policy, therefore, is only a step towards potentially opening the door to more realistic conversations around sex work. Will the Council admit that it has some way to go to understand sex workers operating here and their contributions to this city?
Thank you. The draft policy is purely in relation to the licensing and regulation of sex establishments in accordance with the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1982. I will say, though, I think I welcome your question in that it is important to understand this in a wider context, and it is not the case that the establishments that are licensed under this policy, or that could be licensed under this policy, are the only examples of sex work and the wider industry around sex work. The only examples that might exist, that it's that if we regulate this in a particular way, we've got to understand how that fits into the wider context and the effect that has on such issues as the safety of people in that industry in a wider sense. So thank you for your question. All right, I have a statement. Oh, do you want to stay put? Because I think you're for the first statement, Sally.
Thank you. Yes. In respect of report 2.3, 4.33, 4.36 and policy draft part 8, the SWU, that is the Sex Workers Union branch 600 of the BFAWU, that's the Bakers Union, is keen to contribute insight for the development of policy and identification of potential areas for future SEVs by giving a meaningful sense of safety and safeguarding for staff and performers working within them. For example, Brooke Magnati makes the point in Sex, Lies and Statistics, page 24, that there are lower incidences of assault around SEVs through the presence of CCTV and security staff. This enhances the safety of the surrounding area rather than making it more dangerous. Areas for location of an SEV should therefore not be rejected because of assumptions made based on the debunked Lilith report. Moral biases, reductive characterizations of workers and customers are unhelpful in creating harm reduction policies, and we urge the Council to develop greater insight into the realities of workers and strip club environments. We encourage the promotion of our union within SEVs. We consider we can provide a valuable bridge role in communicating workers' conditions to the Council, ensuring ongoing safety. Licensed SEVs make us all safer. I hope the Council accepts the union's offer of collaborating to find the best locations and conditions.
Thank you, thank you. So obviously we're about to discuss this item on the agenda, so I say to members, do please listen to what you've heard and take that on board and respond if you wish appropriately. Thank you. Rosa, Vince, do you have a statement as well? Thank you.
Hiya, thanks very much. I'm Rosa. So I first want to emphasise that we must prioritise harm reduction. Workers are safer with licensed venues with good transport links. Workers are less safe in unlicensed venues, private parties, or travelling at night to licensed venues outside of Sheffield. As the data demonstrate, and academic literature, this is my area, as the data demonstrate, SEVs don't make surrounding areas less safe for others. Second, I worry that this policy is open to misuse as a de facto ban because the conception of location, as I've already discussed, makes licence approval unattainable. I have a few points on this. Designating the central LAC inappropriate as it's residential is unreasonable when much more disruptive nightlife is permitted. This unjustifiably treats SEVs differently to clubs, sports bars, casinos. Suggesting that, for example, one mixed-use space makes a whole area inappropriate feels dishonest. This is referring to the LAC report, that one mixed-use space is referring to the South Sheffield. When half of consultation respondents agreed that an SEV shouldn't be near a school, 20 square kilometres probably wasn't the breadth of area they had in mind. Given this, and this is something I want to emphasise, given this, the clause blocking applicants from appealing rejections on the grounds of locality is particularly unfair. If you approve this policy today, please work with us to ensure that it cannot function as a de facto ban. If you reject this policy today, I urge you to work with the union to create a policy utilising workers' expertise and understanding the established dangers of overly restrictive licensing. Thanks.
Thank you. And again, thank you for your statement. I would suggest to members to take that on board and respond if you wish during the discussion on the item. That brings us to the end of public petitions, questions and statements. I think the next item is members' questions. So we've had one question from Mark Rusling. Mark, have you had the answer to that? Do you have a supplementary?
No, just to put on record, I think this is the street bins area is an area that we probably need to look at over the next year, whether that's in conjunction with LACs or in other ways, because it's certainly an issue that all of us as elected councillors will be getting in our inboxes. So put it on the agenda. I know we talked about it in our planning meeting on Wednesday, but want to look at in the future.
Thank you. You know, yes, I quite agree. I do sometimes worry that we just don't have enough provision in some places, and that inevitably leads to litter flying around our streets that we could otherwise be avoiding, and you know, greater costs and greater nuisance. Okay, thank you for that. Next item on the agenda is therefore the sexual entertainment policy, is it? I think. Sorry? Work programme. Right. Sorry, I'm here. Right. Work programme. Amanda.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have anything to add. I believe you had a successful work programming session on Wednesday, which will obviously inform the work programme from the coming year, and I'll be working with Richard to make sure that that's all in place for the next meeting.
Yes, thank you. It's a shame, really, that we don't have a report from that we could add to today, because we're actually approving a document that is already somewhat out of date once Wednesday's meeting is written up. That understood. Any comments from members? No? Okay, can we approve the work programme? Okay, thank you, that's agreed. Okay, item 8, sex establishment licensing policy. Can we have officers to present? Do you want to introduce yourselves and present the report? Thank you.
Chair, we've also got Ed Sexton here in case there's any questions on the environmental impact assessment. Equality impact assessment, sorry.
Morning everyone, I'm Clive Bauer, Service Manager of Licensing, the general side of things. Would you like me to introduce the report? Yep. So the purpose of the report this morning is to seek approval for the sex establishment policy. The policy sets out the local expectations and gives clear guidelines in relation to the licensing of sex establishments, and gives direction and focus to the licensing subcommittee in determining applications. We've considered the consultation responses detailed in the report at point 3 and Appendix B. We've also carried out a detailed equalities impact assessment at Appendix C, and an area rationale as part of the policy. We have not identified an appropriate locality for the licensing of an SEV, but will accept and determine any application and come to a decision based on matters as they stand at that time. Just to point out that this is not a ban on sex establishments or sexual entertainment venues, but a starting point from which the council committee will start. Thank you.
Thank you. Members? Sue. And I've got Mark and David.
Thank you, and thank you for putting together this rather long report. I just wanted to make a couple of comments and then ask a question or two. I mean, I think certainly my main aim in looking at this would be to consider how to reduce the risk of harm. And whatever our individual views on the sex industry or sexual entertainment venues, I think there's quite a lot of evidence that people are safer in a licensed premises, whether that's from their personal physical risk, their risk of their mental health, and also risk to, for example, very vulnerable people, people who've been trafficked, for example, into the country, would probably be much less likely in a venue that was properly regulated. I am a bit concerned that nowhere in this report does it mention the fact that there's been a working group discussing this issue, and I'm just wondering why that wasn't mentioned at all. And I'm also not very comfortable with the use of the term customers. And I know it keeps saying customers includes all members of the public, but I think a member of the public walking past or living close by to a venue wouldn't necessarily see themselves as being a customer. But my main question sort of relates to, I think, the issues that we've already heard about, which is about this use of the lax as a way of identifying or not identifying suitable venues. I think the idea that we can use a whole geographical zone of a lac to say it's not suitable for any type of venue. You know, not every bit of a lac is suitable for housing. Not every part of a lac would be suitable for building a school. So I think it would almost be better not to have that included and just to say that no suitable venues had been locations had been identified at that point. And I would like some reassurance that sort of very big scale analysis couldn't be used reasonably to prevent somebody applying for a licence, because I just find that not logical at all. So yeah, and I also note what has just been pointed out, which to be fair I hadn't picked up, about the lack of option to appeal on grounds of locality. So I think if we combine those two facts, we're making things really probably unnecessarily difficult. So I'd just be interested to see what comments there are on that. Thank you.
Thank you. There's no reason why the working group wasn't mentioned. It was an oversight. It's not a secret that there was a working group. It just wasn't mentioned in the policy. So there's no reason for that. The second bit about the welfare, we also take that very seriously. It's something that's come up throughout the consultations, and we've tried to make Section 8 of the policy as robust as we can on safeguarding. We've spoken to a number of responsible authorities on that area, and as you've heard this morning, we've had an offer from the Sex Workers Union to increase that, which we're happy to take up. We also take that very seriously. The use of the lax, as we've said in the report and in the comments, we haven't been able to do a street-by-street analysis of each area, and we felt that the lax was probably the best way to look at it. Each application that comes in will be looked at on its own individual merits and based on facts at that time. So these are different, they come under different legislation to licensed premises, alcohol licensed premises, to gambling licensed premises, so they'll be looked at for different things. But it's not a reason to reject immediately. It's more to reverse the burden of proof back onto the applicant to say, you tell us that the location that you're proposing to open is the best location. So it's not a instant no if they were to open, if they were to apply for any of these areas. And then the final point on the appeals on the grounds of locality, that's actually in the legislation, so it's on one of the discretionary grounds, and it's the legislation that says that applicants are unable to appeal on the grounds of locality. That's not a policy decision.
Thank you. I was before I come to you, Mark. Sorry, David. I was going to query this because I found it is the line on page 42. I'm not sure that sentence is grammatical. However, the right to appeal does not apply where the licence was refused on grounds that the use of premises in the vicinity or the layout, character or condition of the premises. I don't think that sentence actually makes sense as a sentence, so I think we possibly have a problem there. But as you say, if it's covered in the legislation, I dare say it doesn't particularly matter. So I guess we can leave that. David.
Thank you, Chair. Mine are mainly comments, and whilst I could go on at length on this subject, you'll be pleased to know that I will limit myself to a couple of key points. Firstly, to say that I support the policy that's before us today for two key main reasons. Anyone that's been involved in licensing, as most people do, will know that under current legislation there's a presumption that operators will operate their premises responsibly unless evidence can be provided otherwise to prove that's not the case. And quite often, if someone objects to a licence application, this is an individual that's never seen the Licensing Act before, that comes in their own capacity and will be faced, when they get in that room, by a multinational company in some cases, represented by a barrister who spent his whole life studying licensing, and it tends not to be much of a fair contest. So anything that actually puts more emphasis on the applicant just to prove that they will operate responsibly, for me, is really reassuring, and I think this policy does make applicants, puts much more emphasis on them to prove that they are going to be responsible operators, and I welcome that. The other reason is that previously I have had concerns about what was referred to as a nil limit for sexual entertainment venues, because I was very worried that if we didn't have licensed venues, then unlicensed venues would spring up, and that would cause significant problems. I think, and I've asked the question many times, in the 5 years since the last licensed venue closed, there hasn't been any unlicensed activity that we're certainly aware of, so that demand isn't there. So for those grounds I support the policy. What I am concerned about in this area, and what I would welcome views and comments from the people in the balcony, is that under the current Licensing Act, any licensed premises in the city can provide sexual entertainment on their premises, provided they don't do so more than 11 times a year. They don't need to seek permission, they don't need any special conditions put in place, they can just do it. And if anybody with a brain better than mine can add up the number of licensed premises in the city and times that by 11, there's significant issues there. And I wonder whether that's an issue that we also ought to be looking at in terms of putting better protections and safeguardings in, and I would welcome views from everybody in that. But I'll leave it to that and say I support that for those reasons. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't think you're asking for responsible officers from that, so I'll move on. Mark.
Thanks, Chair. A few points about this, and take Sue's points about the working group, which I think was a good forum for a number of robust discussions and proper discussions. So first up, I think from all of us, just thank Claire, Shimler, Sam, Ed and Ian for the work that's gone into this, because significant amount of work has gone into this over a number of months. I mean, I think the first thing to say is, I suspect we'd all agree, legislation that's over 40 years old is probably out of date in this area. David's already highlighted one area of a lacuna, but, you know, the concept of the internet, OnlyFans, all of this kind of stuff that this world operates in was obviously not in the minds of the people who drafted the bill in 1982. So I think that's one area, and I've mentioned that to a number of people that I've had conversations with. That's something that I'd be very interested in working with interesting parties to see how we could put a little bit of pressure on people who have the power to rectify that, to do so. I think one of the reasons why I'm personally supportive of this policy is the enhanced safeguards that is in with the policy should an application comes in. It puts harm reduction up front. And I think that the one group of people that are fairly silent in the existing policy are the people working in the industry. And the new policy puts those people up front. Sally, your point about the sex workers union, I think that's really well made. Personally, I support that. I think, again, if you look at the previous policy, there's lots of signposting, but it's signposting to organisations that help people to exit the industry, which I think is important, but there's very little in there to help people who want to stay in the industry and work in the industry in a safe way. So I personally very much support that. David's again mentioned that those two words, nil limit, aside from as an ex-English teacher, you could read that as meaning a limit of 0 or a limit of infinity. That's not a helpful way of describing a policy to the public. So I think that the form of wording that is in this policy is a much more good faith, a much better faith way of trying to explain our actual powers and our actual policy position to the public, whether they are people who would want to use these facilities, work in these facilities, live near them. The flipping of the burden of proof, I think, is really, really important. And I think particularly as an elected councillor who may at some point in the future have an application in my ward, it forces you to think, how would you respond to that? Not as a general policy position in anywhere in the city, but as a specific application in a specific property in your ward. I think that's a very useful clarifying activity that this has done. And I want to just thank particularly Rosa and Sally, who over a number of conversations have helped me personally and a number of us to understand this issue in much more depth. Your suggestion of that particular book, The Ethical Stripper, if people haven't read it, they should. It really, really explains the issue. It gets away from us and them, particularly this idea that they, working in the industry, are somehow different to the rest of us. And I think, just to finish in support of the policy, if there's one thing that the discussions in the last 4 or 5 months, 6 months have done, it's to get away from this slightly outdated moralistic view and into a place which treats sexual entertainment venues as a licensing issue without any of the kind of accompanying moralistic baggage. And I think, Sally, you mentioned it's only a step. I agree, it is only a step, but it is a step. It's the first time we've had a new policy for 14 years. I think that tells you something, and that's not entirely down to COVID. So personally, I support this policy, but I think it's the start of an ongoing conversation with people in the balcony and others.
Thank you, Mark. Sophie, I've not seen the other hands after Sophie. Have I missed anyone? Okay, Sophie.
Thank you, Chair. I think first better start by saying fundamentally, as a Liberal, I support policies that approach issues in a way that reduces harm and follow the evidence. And as a member of the working group as well, I think for the benefit of those that weren't there, one of the more powerful testimonies that really cemented my view on this was a member who came to say about how they attend private parties and that's how they make a living, and how actually they would genuinely much rather work in a licensed venue with CCTV, security, exit work support, supported by unions, like we've heard from the members that have come today, and that regulation, rather than travelling to people's homes where they don't have that support. And that really, really cemented my view on this. And I think when we approach issues like this, we need to look at realistically, however our moral opinions may be on the industry as a whole, how does this affect the people that are working in it? To address Rosa's point on over-interpretation of this policy in practice, I think I'd like to hope that I speak for all councillors here as well, that as the public face of the council, should this policy start being over-interpreted in practice, that we are accessible to come and challenge and scrutinise that in practice. And if you feel like that's happening with a licence of any type, not just as a SEV in your area, then that's what we're here for. I've got a couple of questions, as Councillor Alston's mentioned as well, about the choice of LAC area-wide for rationale. I mean, obviously this has divided the city, which is which is huge, not just in terms of population, but in terms of geography as well, is a seventh of the city. And when we've seen nil limits being challenged and overturned in cities like Edinburgh, I believe, can they be reviewed? Can this decision for a LAC area be reviewed in time? Should it actually then prove to be the de facto ban in practice? I think for the benefit of the viewing public, it'd be good to get a sense of how that process would take place. Should that be reviewed in practice, and what sort of timeline that be looking at? And my second question is about reversing the burden of proof. I understand why this has been put into this policy, but I would have concern about treating businesses differently based on the work that they do. Do we think that this could open us up to legal challenge? And is this something that is currently done, for example, with nightclubs and casinos? Thank you.
Do you want to respond to that?
Thank you. So the overtime review, we haven't had an application for an SEV since 2022. So yeah, we've had nothing to test this on. So we can only take an application if one was to come in and test it and see how it works. As with all policy, this will be reviewed periodically, so I suppose it depends how many applications we get to what that periodic review would be, and also whether there's any changes to legislation or anything materially significant to it. In terms of the burden of proof, so it's difficult to compare this to nightclubs or casinos or anything like that, because they're all different legislation. But under the Licensing Act that deals with alcohol licensed premises, so the nightclubs, we are able to put in a cumulative impact policy or a cumulative impact assessment that would essentially reverse the burden of proof. So we are able to do that under different pieces of legislation as well.
Okay, all right, thank you. Mary.
Thank you. I just want to, listening to the people that have come and spoken about the sex workers, and particularly those who are part of unions, and what they have to say, and the expertise and experience they might bring. I think we really do need to listen to what they've got to say, and maybe a piece of work is something that should come forward from meeting and discussing those issues with them. And I think, I'm supporting this policy, and health and safety of the individuals and the customers and people who are living in a particular area are paramount in this. I'm not sure why the LACs were mentioned, but I've been represented a ward where which includes Attercliffe, which is seen as a suitable venue according to some people for these for establishments like this. I think it is really important we understand how these venues operate in particular areas when we're obviously considering applications that come through. But health and safety is paramount. I think discussions with the sex workers and their unions is really important, but I do support the policy.
Thank you, thank you. So I'm going to make a few comments and questions. So the decision in front of us, as we've alluded to already, it's about licensing and regulating a small part of a much wider industry. And I know, David, you referred to kind of unlicensed venues, and I think unlicensed venues is another tiny part of the much wider industry, isn't it? And so it's important for us to understand how effectively regulating and licensing a small part of a large industry, with a view to making that part of the industry safer and to mitigate any negative impacts there might be on the wider community, or to achieve the licensing objectives. How that act of regulation impacts the whole of the industry, and whether if we push too hard in the regulation, that it squeezes the work out into other areas which may be less safe. And obviously parts of the industry may indeed also be safer. There may be, again, it's something I would have liked to have seen assessed in the report. If people are pushed out of licensed venues into unlicensed venues or illegal activities. That presumably makes them less safe. If they're pushed into work on the internet, maybe that's more safe. But this is something that needs to be assessed. I'm slightly unhappy that we don't really have a clear picture of what the wider industry looks like, and the impact of regulation of this small part of it that is going to have. I am persuaded by the people who've come to speak to us today, and I would also draw members' attention to the public health section of the reports in front of them, which is an Appendix D, starting on page 96 to 104. And the conclusion on page 104 of that talks about the importance of an evidence-based health approach to the sex industry and sexual entertainment, based on workers' rights and the empowerment of sex workers, based on decriminalisation and geographically compact zones of tolerance. Can somebody explain to me exactly what a geographically compact zone of tolerance is, officers? in that line on page 104.
Is that the public health
report,
evidence? Yeah. It's a public health document, so I can't speak for their document.
I would assume it means that to tolerate the industry in a relatively small area and not to have it everywhere. I think that's possibly what it's suggesting, which I would agree with, and I think it lends itself to the criticisms of the area analysis that we've had that just talks about very large areas and saying, well, this very large area is not a suitable area. As a final point, just skipping to the end of the conclusion, the articles review the highlights important to ensuring lived experience, the voices of sex workers play a role in informing policy and practice. So I think I draw members' attention to that. I had a number of concerns with the equalities impact assessment. You'll remember, Ed, that I sent you an email on that. I think possibly, which had 13 or 14 points in it, I think possibly you've responded to one or two of those in the impact assessment. Could you explain to me why you haven't really taken any notice of the other 10 or 11?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to assure you that we have taken account, and if I may just make a general sort of statement about the equality impact assessment process and how that works, but I will certainly address the points you've raised, if that's okay. As members are aware, the equality impact assessments are aware of evidencing that public authorities are having due regard to the public sector equality duty, which is to have due regard to eliminate discrimination, advance equality of opportunity, and foster good relations. EIAs also consider the wider areas and categories of inequality that the Council has recognised as well. The aim of the EIA is to be balanced across all categories, which doesn't necessarily mean that there's equal impact identified across all different protected characteristics and categories. The aim of the EIA isn't to argue or advocate for any position, but to inform decision making. And I want to emphasise as well as there's an independent and rigorous EIA challenge and approval process within the Council. So in other words, there's been a lot of discussion between ourselves and legal and the service about the EIA, and our job is to consider EIAs being developed by services and then to challenge and then to see if we can approve. And they are subject to continual review. So apologies for that lengthy introduction. I hope that we had addressed the points that you raised in your email, Chair. That there were specifically points I think you raised about disability, for example, where you were the earlier draft of the EIA that you saw you felt had overstated the risk around, for example, physical accessibility to buildings. And I think that's been taken account of in the further EIA version that's before the committee today. There is obviously a relevant point generally around mental health, which comes under the terms of disability in the Equality Act. Other additions since the draft that you've seen, there's additional information in relation to sexual orientation. And I hope the other points you raised there, I'm sure you'll say otherwise, are adequately addressed in the EIA. As I say, it seeks to achieve a balance, and certainly the position in terms of approving EIAs is to help the service consider everything in its entirety.
So, for example, I objected to your quoting the Lilith report on the grounds that it had been debunked, and it's been mentioned in this meeting already a couple of times. And you took out one of the references to the Lilith report in the EIA and left in another one. So, what was the rationale for that?
Forgive me, that wasn't I that did that. I received the updated EIA from the service. I was satisfied that there was a balanced approach taken across the EIA, and that relevant references and research had been updated and contextualised in the newer version. But I haven't personally edited any part of the EIA.
So is it your view that the Lilith report is sound or not?
I haven't. That for me would be for the service to answer and to explain its context alongside other research.
Okay, Claire, Ian?
I believe the Lilith report was debunked by a bigger data set was used in a different study, and I think we've covered that in the EIA. So although we've referred to the Lilith report, we've also said that there was a further review which used a larger study base. It still has evidence that there was an increase in sexual assault. But
but
the impact wasn't as great as the Lilith report stated.
Yes, when I say debunked, I'm not referring to that, saying it's the same effect but smaller. It's the Magnanti paper said that actually the effect is not there at all. If it was saying there's a positive effect but it's just small, I don't think that really makes any material difference. And you do refer to that. Well, look, okay, this is I don't want to try and follow all the references to the end in this meeting, but it strikes me that a clear position on evidence like that is necessary in an EIA like this. Look, my point more broadly. So, for example, under the protected characteristic of age, you say there is a substantial impact on the grounds of age, and what the justification of that seems to be that there are a lot of young people working in SEVs. Now, the fact that they're working there is not itself an impact, is it?
Chair, I think there's evidence that's been presented in the report and from submissions in response to the consultation where the impact of working in establishments is highlighted. There are clearly very different points of view and perspectives about that, but I think strictly speaking in terms of considering the Equality Act, I think we would say there is an impact in relation to age. It's across the age spectrum, but I think particularly there's some evidence of younger age people being affected in whatever way through working there.
So don't you need to spell that out in terms of, because as we've heard people saying we feel safer working in one of these than we would working with, in private homes or whatever. That's a positive impact on age if it's an age-related thing, not a negative one. And you just say, well, there's an impact on age. You need to be able to say whether it's positive or negative, don't you, or for it to be any use to us.
I think I would accept that the EIA has been developed over many years, and I think that the version you see now reflects the continual updating. I think it's fair to say it's a lengthy document. There are formatting issues probably within it, and I certainly would accept that those impacts could be repeated more clearly across all the categories that are identified within the EIA. So I wouldn't disagree with that point at all.
Okay, so a couple of things I think it seems to be missing. I take the point about, Sue's point about referring to customers. There's almost nothing about customers in here. There's suggestion there may be impact on the general public. So so one group of customers that come to mind would be disabled men who struggle to have any kind of sexual experience on their own charms and required to pay for it. They would benefit from this, from sexual entertainment being available in a safe and legal setting, wouldn't they? That's an impact. That should be in the impact assessment, shouldn't it?
Again, I wouldn't disagree as a principle at all. I think there's always scope for more information to go into an EIA. Hopefully, a balance has been achieved in the document as a whole in terms of disability rights and the broad rights of customers. But I would accept that not every example would have been given within the EIA.
And another one being the impact on poverty of young women who can earn reasonable money doing this and can't otherwise. Is that not a fairly obvious thing that needs to be in a document that's many pages long?
Chair, I believe that is drawn out within the EIA.
Yeah, sorry, there is a reference to that, but it doesn't seem to have the prominence of the other things. I just struggle slightly that we seem to labour kind of slightly notional things and miss out some quite large and obvious things in this piece of work. All right, moving on. Yes, I just want to endorse the comments that have been made about the area rationale and its weakness. We are saying, as an authority, we have not identified any suitable locations. I think there are some suitable locations, I've got to say. As authority, we have not identified any because we haven't looked. That is the position we've taken. And I would expect applicants coming forward to have the same appreciation of the kind of the weak logic of the area rationale that members have had in this meeting. I was just passing the other day, I was passing the abandoned pub at the northwest end of Neeps End Lane. I thought, well, that'd be perfectly suitable. I can't say for sure, perfectly suitable. I don't know everything that's going on around there, but it seemed to be in the middle of an industrial area, not close to any sensitive locations. That'd be perfectly fine. And, you know, it's a nice old pub that might become, once again, a nice building. I'm sure there are others. I am concerned that by having a transparently thin area rationale behind this policy, we are opening ourselves up to unnecessarily to challenge. But there you go. Yes, so those are my comments. I don't know if anybody wishes to respond to any of that.
Chair, can I?
Yes, go on.
Respond just briefly to that. The concept of locality isn't defined in the legislation, so it's difficult for us to take it down to the minutiae when the city's under such regeneration. So we felt that the LAC areas was probably not too wide, but wide enough to look at these. If an application was to come in, for the committee to be able to look at what is in the local area and make a decision based on the facts at that time. Is that suggested area next to or near enough to a school or a park or anything like that? And I think the LAC areas do allow us to do that. But again, it will be tested. We've not used this policy before. We haven't got any licensed venues at the moment, and we haven't had any applications in to test it against. So we can test it. Members of the licensing subcommittee can depart from policy if necessary, and reasons can be put in place for that, and then a review can be carried out.
So you don't think there's a chance of there being a geographically compact zone of tolerance within a small part of one of these LAC areas?
Yeah, so I think just reiterating what Claire said, that the pace of change in the city, an applicant who's got unlimited, we heard a profile of some of the firms and the applicants and the resources that could come along with much more unlimited resource to really deep dive into micro level areas. we're not saying that that could not be possible. And I would stress again, it's not a nil limit, but there has to be a level of, there has to be a balance as to the level of detail that the council goes into to assess every street and area. And this is the area that this is the level that we felt was appropriate. And the example you gave, Chair, of an area that looks fine now, you know, without really looking at the local plan and the details and what regeneration, we know that there are massive housing targets for brownfield land, so brownfield sites that may historically have looked in a more suitable place now could well be earmarked over the next 10 years for housing. We may not have an application come in for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. We've seen the pace of change in the city at the minute. So I think those are some of the factors that on balance led us to decide to go at that level. But it's not a ban. Applicants can still come forward.
Thank you. Sue.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I just wonder whether, in view of the concerns about this geographical part of the document, whether maybe should there be an application, we should then, following that, have a report back to this committee or its successor committee, depending on how long it is before we get an application, on how the geographical issues in the policy actually worked in practice, because clearly several of us have concerns about
So just to clarify, we're not adopting the area rationale here. We're adopting the policy, which doesn't include the area rationale. The area rationale is a paper to inform us today. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. Good. So I think we don't have to be quite so concerned about it as that. Yeah. So Mark.
That was the first question I had. Yeah. So it's just purely the policy. Yeah. And then the second question, so within that policy, if elected members think that there are places in their own wards that are suitable for an SEV, it's perfectly within our ability as 84 elected members to nominate places within our wards that should be considered for SEVs, presumably.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of if an applicant's coming forward and they request information or views, but I suppose it depends. If you're meaning you see an area and you would approach applicants and say, we would like one in this area, I suppose it depends how that means. But we are not saying it will be impossible for someone to identify a set of street or a location where it could be possible. You know, and I come back to the point, it's not a ban.
Right. Okay. I'm not seeing any more hands. Can we move to a decision? Is the paper agreed? I'm not seeing any dissent. Okay. Thank you. That policy is adopted effective immediately. Thank you all very much. We've put quite a lot of work into this over the last few months, and it has been quite difficult at times. And Mark, I would say you could always take the example of what happened with the local plan and nominate other members' wards as places you want things to happen, couldn't you? All right. The next item on the agenda is the private hire vehicle signage review. Craig and Daniel, do you want to come and introduce yourselves and report? Thank you.
Good morning, members. My name is Daniel Parlett, Licensing Strategy and Policy Officer, and my colleague is Craig Harper, Chief Licensing Officer today. So this report sets out the proposed amendments to the policy on private hire vehicle signage as contained within the private hire operator and vehicle licence policy. The report also details the consultation process that's taken place and seeks approval of the proposed amendments to be implemented immediate effect. So a little bit of background and information on the proposal. So the Waste and Street Scene Committee approved the current private hire operator and vehicle licence policy in November 2022, which included changes to the vehicle signage requirements for private hire vehicles, with a revised door signage design introduced in July 2023. Details of the current signage requirements can be found at Appendix A of the report. In November 2023, the DFT published its taxi and private hire vehicle licensing best practice guidance for licensing authorities in England, which includes recommendations on vehicle identification and signage. As part of this, the DFT recommends that licensing authorities limit private hire vehicle signage to a licence plate or disc and a pre-booked only door sign. Since the introduction of the new signage in July 2023, the service has issued over 1,400 defect notices to private hire vehicle licence holders for breaches of the current vehicle policy, with an overwhelming majority of these specifically related to breaches of the signage requirements, indicating a lack of consistency in how vehicle signage is displayed across the Sheffield City Council licensed private hire fleet. The DFT also recognises that some private hire vehicle licence holders may wish to use their vehicles for the purposes of executive hire, and sets out guidance on how authorities should handle such requests. The full DFT guidance regarding vehicle signage, including the rationale behind these recommendations, is available at Appendix B. So the service has considered all of this information as part of this review and used it as a basis on which to propose a revised policy for private hire vehicle signage, which is in short, the service is now seeking approval for the following, and that is to remove the requirement for private hire vehicles to display exterior private hire operator signage, and for licensing officers to approve requests for exemptions from displaying private hire vehicle signage where the vehicle is to be used for the purpose of executive hire, subject to a specified criteria and conditions, which is in line with the existing scheme of delegations. The proposed amendments recommended for approval can be found in full at Appendix G. Consultations of the service has undertaken a 4-week public consultation, which details of which can be found in section 4 of the report, along with a summary of the 357 responses received. The service has listened to and acted on widespread concerns about driver safety and the privacy implications of permanent door signage by revising the proposed policy to allow for secure, non-permanent signage. This change aims to balance driver safety with the need for clear vehicle identification and to support public reassurance and effective enforcement. The alternative options are available to members and outlined in section 5 of the report alongside additional information detailing the impact of each alternative option. Section 6 of the report covers the equality, diversity, inclusion with an equality impact assessment available at Appendix F. Any financial and legal implications associated with the report are outlined in sections 7 and 8, with section 9 providing details of the climate impact assessment that's been undertaken. And to summarise, the proposed amendments to the policy on private hire vehicle signage represent a proportionate response to the challenges identified through operational experience and public consultation. They support a more effective and efficient licensing system, upholding public safety and reflecting current national guidance. By adopting the recommended proposal, the Council will continue to ensure its policies remain fit for purpose and responsive to stakeholder needs. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members? Mark.
Thanks for your work on this. Again, just to reiterate, I entirely agree, we all do, I think all 9 of us do, that the permanent versus secure points, I think secure is right, permanent is not. And also Ibrahim and Lee as well in his messages, the fact that there are different rules in one place depending on where you are licensed is truly absurd. And I know the Mayor of Greater Manchester has started to launch a campaign talking about that in Manchester. That seems to make a lot of sense to me. We need a system that has, if not national regulation, but national rules, and a race to the top rather than a race to the bottom. It just seems no one's really looked at this from the top and said this is a great system, but it's the system we've got at the moment. But I'd lend our support to efforts to ameliorate that system and make sure that all drivers operating in the city are upholding the same standards.
Thank you, Mark. I quite agree. And I apologise to the drivers for the confusion in terms of what the proposals were, and Appendix D and Appendix G and all that. you know, welcome to our world in terms of, you know, long papers with multiple appendices and making sense of them. But I will observe, we consulted on a proposal that was permanent signage, and the driver said they didn't want that, and we listened, and we have now brought before members a proposal for secure but not permanent signage, and it is entirely a result of us consulting and listening to drivers. So I hope, you know, that's, you know, that's as it should be. You know, we are not a committee that goes away and does sham consultations. We actually do listen to people. So I hope that's Peter. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I want to take a few minutes to talk about why these changes are a positive step forward for the amazing drivers who keep this city moving. These changes are about giving them more flexibility, more safety, and more respect for the important work they do. It is good to see licensing have aligned their policies to follow more closely with best practice from the Department for Transport by removing the requirement for exterior operator signage. It means drivers can work with multiple operators without having to constantly get out in all weather types trying to change their signage. It simplifies their day-to-day operations and gives them more freedom to choose how they wish to work. It also means we are keeping pace with the rest of the country, and local licensing rules are now more consistent with what's expected elsewhere. I've heard concerns from drivers about safety and privacy, how permanent signage can make them a target for when they're off duty. It can expose them to unwanted attention. That's why it is good to see that the new policy allows for something slightly different, still secure but non-permanent signage. Drivers will be able to remove signs when they're not working, helping to protect their privacy and peace of mind. This amended policy is a win for licensing too, as it helps reduce the risk of incorrect enforcement. Over 1,400 defect notices were issued last year, many due to signage issues. With clearer, simpler rules, it should now be easier for drivers to stay compliant and avoid unnecessary penalties. Those that refuse to now follow the more simpler rules should now be easier to hold to account. This policy also aligns well with national best practice from the DFT. That means Sheffield is keeping pace with the rest of the country, and local licensing rules are now more consistent with what's expected elsewhere. This is a positive in terms of fairness. And finally, Chair, there's an environmental and financial benefit. Less signage means less waste, fewer materials and lower costs for drivers. It's a small change that adds up over time. More flexibility, better safety, fewer penalties, and a policy that respects the professionalism of some of our hardest working members of society. These changes, as the Chair has said, didn't happen in a vacuum. They came from the feedback from drivers, their voices, and they show what's possible when everyone works together. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Oratory is not dead. There we go. So with that rhetorical flourish, can we agree this policy? Yep, nods all round. Thank you very much. That policy is agreed. Thank you. Thank you for coming, people in the gallery. Item 10, Sheffield Market Strategy. Thank you. Do you want to introduce yourselves and the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, good morning, everybody. My name is Rebecca Bland. I'm the Service Manager for Markets.
I'm Ben Brailsford, Assistant Director, Street Scene Services.
So, I'll be introducing the market strategy today, and I just want to talk you through the aims of what it sets out. So, the aim is to set out a clear vision and key objectives to provide a framework for actions and to define the council's role in shaping the future of markets provision in Sheffield. Sheffield markets are valuable community and economic assets, providing spaces for local enterprise, access to affordable goods and opportunities for social interaction. However, in recent years, markets up and down the country have faced a range of challenges, including changing consumer habits, increased competition and ageing infrastructure. In response to these issues and following a prior request from the Environmental Services and Regulation Policy Committee, a 5-year market strategy has been developed. The market strategy sets out a clear vision for strengthening markets that are operated by Sheffield City Council. By supporting entrepreneurship, we aim to create resilient markets that contribute to the local economy and reflects the diverse character of our communities. While markets currently operate without a strategic framework, previous studies and plans have taken place. However, this work is now outdated. Consultations have taken place in the form of a cross-party task and finish group that was formed in January. Meetings have taken place with market traders across both markets, and key stakeholders including Crystal Peak Shopping Centre and the Moor Management have also been consulted. The new strategy provides a focus and direction of travel for Sheffield markets for the next 5 years, so that's 2026 to 2031, and it identifies the key priorities identified within there, which are financial sustainability, future investment, operational improvements, attracting new traders, activating spaces, data and engagement, marketing and promotion, sustainability and community and stakeholder integration. It also captures the challenges and opportunities to be harnessed in order to ensure the markets remain sustainable, inclusive and responsive to community and customer needs. So the recommendations presented to committee today are to support the next steps, to review and approve the market strategy, including its vision, priorities and plan, endorse and identify priority areas such as the financial performance, customer experience and the focus for delivery, approve the strategy for implementation and support any ongoing engagement, benchmarking with stakeholders, traders, community partners and end users, and also supporting refining the implementation plans as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments from members? Comments from Mark?
Yeah, thanks for the work on this and to everyone who was on the task and finish group, which I know has done a lot of the heavy lifting. There's obviously quite a different set of statistics there for the Moor and for Crystal Peaks, and there's obviously more of an issue there for Crystal Peaks that really needs to be looked into. I thought it was potentially very strong on the analysis of strengths and weaknesses, and that slightly less strong on the action plan. So what I was going to suggest, Chair, if we maybe brought this back in 6 months, 9 months, whenever makes sense, with a sense of where we're at so far and prioritisation and dates. There's a lot of actions in there. I think some are maybe more important than others, and some will work potentially better on the Moor or Crystal Peaks or vice versa. I think there's some really interesting stuff that might be cross-cutting with other committees in the council. Around the incubator for small businesses, I think there's something potentially very good there. Also, with some of the stuff announced this week in the spending review around the 1.2 billion for training and for apprenticeships, there might be stuff there that we could link into this. But again, going back to that real granular detail, I think is what we need to see next. But I think analysis-wise, this is excellent. It gives us a platform for that. We just need to see what are those specific steps and when are they going to be done by.
Thanks, Mark. I would endorse that. I mean, we do have a plan for kind of more specific action plan type decisions coming forward, don't we? So do you want to just spell that out for us?
So I think the key thing is putting together a more detailed action plan. If we break it down, obviously the strategy is over 5 years. I think we need to break it down year on year, and it would be good if we continue with the task and finish potentially to maybe form part of that. There's a lot of information in the strategy itself, and I think by being clear on what our first priorities are would be helpful, and therefore we can do the further work and the analysis on that to then bring it forward, if that's something that you'd like to consider.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, it was a question I was meaning to raise. We do have the task and finish group. There are still meetings in the diary for it, and the question is whether to stop that now we've got this strategy, or whether to carry it on. And I guess I'm hearing we should carry it on. Is that? I'm getting nods. So yeah, Mary, you're a member. Do you want to?
I'm on the task and finish group, and it has been quite an interesting journey to get to this stage. I think there's, the markets in Sheffield and particularly on the moor, great potential for the future. All sorts of things could develop from the strategy, and particularly because obviously within the local plan we're building more and more houses in and around the city centre, which I'm sure will support the market in the future. Crystal Peaks has got its own issues. I go to Crystal Peaks markets a lot more because I live down that end of the city, and I shop there at Crystal Peaks and in the market quite frequently. You can get stuff in Crystal Peaks you can't get anywhere else. So it is it is quite a busy place when I go and visit. It is very, very busy. So, obviously there's more work to be done, and I do think it needs a bit of a revamp in terms of how it looks. It's looking quite tired at the moment. Yeah, thank you.
Sophie?
Absolutely, I agree with Councillor Lee. In terms of on page 207, it talks at the top very briefly about marketing and promotion, and having had a brief glance at the comms that come out on our markets over time, it seems a lot of it is and rightly so, there's been some very good pieces of work and pieces of social media content that have come out on the moor market, but we don't necessarily see as much really much promotion coming out of Crystal Peaks, or indeed some pop-up markets that we see across weekends or weeks or days. It would be nice, and I hope we can get some assurances that will be more balanced going forward as part of this strategy. Certainly, as you can see with Peaks Market, seeing declining footfall from last year, from the year before last to last year, promoting Peaks Market has to be a priority to ensure that the traders get value for money for the business that they do, and can be supported in their entrepreneurialism. So hopefully we can get some assurances from yourselves that will be more balanced going forward.
Thank you. And just to answer those points, it was identified that the balance wasn't there between the moor and Crystal Peaks. Some work has already started on that to make sure that balance is even. We've also worked with traders more at Crystal Peaks Market, where encouraging them to cross-promote as well. Equally worked with the centre, with the shopping centre, to make sure that some promotions that we're putting out are equally shared on their platforms. And also by working with stakeholders, particularly the Crystal Peaks Shopping Centre, opportunities start to arise with cross-promotion and marketing. We have got some key arrival points at Crystal Peaks. We've also got the library, and we've also got the coach station and the bus station, which can be utilised. And there's some old banners around, again, arrival points by car. So, working with our comms team, working with external stakeholders, there is real opportunities to be able to move forward with marketing promotion, but there's also real opportunities that we need to grab hold of and move forward. And I think this is the exciting part of being able to put this strategy into a plan to then be able to deliver on these key issues. So I'd like to give you that assurance that's already been highlighted and work's begun. Thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing any more hands. Just from me, thank you for all the work that's gone into this report. I think I'm very pleased to say, I think over the years of this committee, or this committee in Western Street Scene, we've taken a little while, but we finally got to a place where we're giving the markets the attention they deserve. And it's not just about, what do we charge them for their energy and this sort of thing, but also what can we offer the traders so that we make the markets a success, we make them somewhere that people want to go and get great value food and great value products, and can eat some really nice food, and particularly the food court of the Moor Market. It's absolutely amazing. Do go there and try out all the various options. But it's our job as a council to support that, to make it a success. Peter.
Yeah, thank you very much for all the work and people who've been at the working group sessions. I would love to see some of those non-stick, sticky footprints guiding people from the moor into the market. I think that would really help.
It's an interesting, I was expecting another speech there for a moment, but the number of people who walk past the front of the Moore Market and not go in, and the number of people who do go in, and I think that we need to just think about just dragging people into the entrance there a little bit harder. I think that's a really good point. But I think there's a list of things that traders are actually banging our doors down asking for, that we need to have a plan to deliver on some of that. All right, can we move to a decision on this? Can we agree the strategy? Everybody agreed? Thank you. I'll take that as agreement, and that is agreed. Thank you very much. Can we have a 5 or 10 minute break? Because I was going to do it after the last item. I think I needed it, but yeah. So let's come back at 22. Thank you. And welcome back. Item 11, page 219, electric vehicle charging infrastructure. Ben, do you want to introduce yourself and the report? Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Ben Brosford, Assistant Director, Street Scene Services. So this report follows on from a decision made by the Transport Regeneration and Climate Policy Committee on the 30th of April, where they decided to discontinue the green parking permits for ultra-low emission vehicles. As part of that decision, a recommendation was received to the joint task and finish group between Transport, Regen and Climate Policy Committee and the Environmental Services and Regulation Policy Committee to develop an investment plan to ensure that any surplus income generated is used in an appropriate manner, including for projects breaking down the barriers to electric vehicle ownership, with an allocation of up to an estimate of £125,000 towards improved electric vehicle charging infrastructure. This report sets out a proposal to approve and implement part of that investment plan as to immediately support the Council's existing EV infrastructure to be better used and more accessible. The Council's already doing a lot on EV charging infrastructure. We're working with the South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority to access a share of up to £8.9 million of capital funding from central government to increase our existing network that we've got. However, we know that the £125,000 we've identified in this report wouldn't create a significant impact in increasing the number of new EV charging points in the city, and that our existing infrastructure isn't meeting the expected optimum usage levels. So the report proposes that we use this money to help fund the utilisation of our existing EV charging infrastructure to be more reliable and more available. So the recommendations out of the report are for the committee to note and endorse the proposed areas of work that will support improvements in our existing electric vehicle charging infrastructure. It will request officers in city transport and parking services work together to cost up options within the agreed proposed areas of work for inclusion in the investment plan, and delegate to the Executive Director of Neighbourhood Services, in consultation with the Task and Finish Group, approval of the final spend on the costed options developed for inclusion in the investment plan, and for those aspects of the investment plan to be implemented immediately.
Thank you. Any comments from members or questions? Sue.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, I'm sort of supportive of this. This may be quite a naive question I'm going to ask, but I just wondered whether, I mean, for most people, I imagine being able to charge their car, they would rather do it on a regular basis, fairly close to home, rather than, and for many people, and I'm one of them, who don't have a driveway, that is actually quite difficult. And I just wondered whether some of this funding could be used to investigate further locations where we could have charging. If that work's already being done, that's brilliant. If not, I just wondered whether that could be included in this.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. That work's already been completed and is part of this work with South Yorkshire Mayoral Combined Authority about increasing where we put our electric vehicle chargers. I think just back to your point of, you know, if you have got a vehicle and you want to go somewhere to charge it, the thing that we're concerned about at the moment is that you want that to be available and reliable, and I think that's the bit at the moment that we're perhaps not able to deliver, and that's what we're looking for this funding to do, is to make sure that when you do want to go to that location, it's working, it's it's easy to find, it's safe, it's well lit, all the kind of things that are going to encourage you to use it. So that's why we're trying to concentrate on those types of barriers rather than just the expanse, because that expanse is coming and a piece of work's being done.
Christine.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm supportive of this policy. I think it is a shame that when these chargers were first installed, there was no thought to the theft of cables. I mean, I don't expect a comment on that. We didn't do it, TRC did that anyway, but it is a shame that this expensive equipment wasn't really fit for purpose. So I absolutely support the use of security cameras and whatever else we can do to make sure they aren't continually stolen. I'm just curious, what kind of innovative new security products are there out there to stop these cables being stolen? Because we need to get our network utilised as much as possible, and we can't when they're not in use. So.
Yeah, I mean, I do need to be clear that this is a national problem. It isn't a Sheffield-based problem. So, you know, not only local authorities but private organisations across the country are grappling with this issue, and it particularly relates to the kind of the advent of rapid chargers, which have got, you know, cables attached to them. So prior to that, when we had sort of slower chargers, you know, people would use their own charging infrastructure to do that. So it is something that wasn't particularly seen as an issue because it was new, it was coming along. And I think, you know, where we are now, sort of 2-3 years on from rapid charging infrastructure being more readily available, is organisations, not just local authorities but private organisations, are trying and testing different ways to kind of reduce the theft. So things like using smart water, so you can track back when you do come across stolen items, you can track that back to particular sites. It can't be, I found this somewhere else. You know, it's that type of stuff. There are triggers, alarms, strobe lights that can be connected to breaks in the infrastructure that currently haven't been used in ours. So there's lots of things that are developing that will make it easier to track things if they do get stolen, reduce the likelihood of them being stolen in the first place, and create kind of more noise and disruption around there. But as with anything, I think, you know, and it goes with any of our car parking sites or anything else that we deliver, having a space that's easily visible, having a space that's patrolled, having a space that's got CCTV in that's well lit, you know, all that kind of stuff. There's good stuff that we can do to reduce the likelihood of somebody thinking that's an easy option to go in. But if they do, then how do we stop them doing that? So there's lots of options there for us to develop.
Thank you. I'm not seeing more hands. So, yes, I also welcome this proposal. It's a slightly strange one in that the TRC committee have abolished the green permit, which I think was a decision that was overdue, given, you know, it was a permit that was right to exist when it was brought in to benefit the very cleanest vehicles, but vehicles that clean are not that rare now. So it turned into something that was actually much too generous and expensive. So there is a revenue implication from that abolition. That comes to this committee for reasons, and we're agreeing that TRC can spend it effectively on improvements to EV infrastructure, which is still their remit. So it's a slightly odd decision for us in that it's really only about a significant amount of revenue that may only be, in fact, a small proportion of the overall revenue benefit of the ending of the green permit. So I think it's right for us to ask the questions, and in the past, this committee, we have implored TRC and Simca to consider cable theft when they put infrastructure in, because the maintenance of that infrastructure, not least because it's an important issue, but also because the maintenance of that infrastructure falls on us, on this committee, and it's slightly odd if the people putting it in don't have to think about that. I think they have taken that message on board, and officers, I'm sure, have ensured that all the committees are on the same page on this, which is most welcome. So I agree with the comments that are made that it is about thinking about how to give people confidence to switch to electric vehicles or plug-in hybrids on the basis that they are going to be able to access the charging infrastructure they need when they need it in the right kind of place, which is likely to be close to the home. Because that's what in order for the switch to happen, the issue is the reliable availability. It's not that they're likely to be charging every day of the week in the city centre and filling up the spaces in the city centre, not desperately well used as it stands, just putting more of those in the hope that it kind of drives behaviour change might not be the most effective way. But I am happy to leave the details of that consideration to the TRC committee, because that is in their remit already, and let's not try to trip over each other as committees. So, with that, can we agree this proposal? Yep, okay, thank you, that is agreed. So, final item on the agenda is Q4 performance monitoring. Richard, do you want to come and introduce yourself? And, well, you've introduced yourself to us already, but for the benefit of anybody who has forgotten from 10 o'clock, introduce yourself and the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. My name is Richard Eyre. I'm the Director of Street Scene and Regulations. And this is the Environmental Service and Regulatory Committee's performance report. Members will recall this is the third quarterly report as part of the new battle rhythm for the Council to provide regular and open and transparent reports on our performance across a number of services. As we said before, it is very early days for the City Council, moving to a really strong performance culture. And I'd just like to feed back to this committee, we're at the forefront of that. There are still some committees which are still wrestling with what their performance report was like, but this committee is on the front foot and starting to talk on a regular basis around the performance of a number of services within its remit. I don't propose to talk through the main area of the report in detail, because it's a similar kind of report as I brought previously, but just to remind members, this is about the journey of moving to a performance culture across the council. You may recall it's been agreed by SNR a couple of years ago to take this tact and to take this route about being transparent around performance, and it leads as a companion to the new council plan and the corporate performance framework. It should enable a comprehensive view of the council's overall performance, council plan outcomes and service delivery and fiscal management. The corporate plan, the council plan provides a golden thread connecting key elements of the performance framework, and that becomes more evident as we start to nail down the performance information members and the public want to see. So as I mentioned, I'm not proposed to go through the report in detail. Unless there are any questions, I'll jump to the appendix, which is on page 251. Again, as I've mentioned before, the council is looking at various software packages, including Power BI, to make this more easy to understand using graphs, etc. But again, we're not quite there as a city council, so we've chosen to do it as a Word document and try and make it as clear as possible by giving each performance metric an ID, talking about the area, the measure, and then a point of focus, so it gives a bit of granular detail to help the reader understand it. And then we've put in there the overall performance for each quarter, the target which has been set, and then hopefully a helpful red, amber, green rating, so the reader can quickly see where performance is of concern. And at the bottom of each page, there's a key to that. So just as a reminder, reds are significant issues. There should be a plan and the reader should expect a plan in place. Ambers, potential issues, needs monitoring, some corrective actions may be needed, and green means the meeting target and no particular issues or risks to flag. The white area on that is where there's an indicator only with no target. So its measure isn't directly under control of the service. So a good indication of that could be city centre footfall. Whereas in Ben's area, city centre management team can influence that, but they're not in sole responsibility and accountability for that measure, because there's lots of external influence which could change that. So again, unless the members require me to, I'm not going to go through all the different metrics. I'll just pull out the ones which are amber. Thankfully, we've got no reds on there. We've got the ESR 3, which is page 251, which is Crystal Peaks Market. And I know Councillor Rusling, Councillor Lee and Councillor Crosthorne have already picked up on this and a piece of work around Crystal Peaks. And Ben and Rebecca's talked earlier around the new market strategy will be a big way of halting that or really pushing that footfall figures and that occupancy level. So again, I'm not going to talk too much detail on those amber points. If I move down to the next amber, which is on page 259, which is around food safety, which is in environmental regulations area. Members have been briefed fully on this, and I'm really pleased to acknowledge the work of the team, the wider team in our environment, health and food safety team. You'll recall at the start of the year there was 299 outstanding registrations, and that's really built over the last year. Reports have been brought to this committee previously around that being a red amber in certain places, and we brought a food plan and a food safety plan which members have acknowledged and accepted, and we've put significant investment into that service. I'm really pleased to say that that's had a major impact. We have got 135 outstanding, and it's still flagging as an amber as on the caution list. But to give some more context, during COVID there was 842 outstanding. We're now at 135, and even before COVID in 2019 we were at 223. So that just shows the great work and the commitment of this committee to really act on food safety and make sure it's a priority. The next amber is 261, which is in parking services, and we just had the last item around EV chargers. We have got a dip in performance around rural rapid chargers again, which Ben's just covered. The majority of that is due to cable theft. So I don't propose to go over that in detail, but it is an amber, it is on the watch list, and it's one officer keenly monitoring and pulling levers to change. And Chair, I think that's the last amber. There are a few whites on there. I know we've had previous discussions in our knowledge briefings and the pre-agenda meeting, but I'm happy to go across the questions. I've asked colleagues from my leadership team to be in attendance if there's anything specific in their particular areas we need to drill into. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. And I say we've kind of discussed exactly what goes in here. Probably every time it's come to us. I do think we need to go to where do a piece of work and just looking at the indicators. And obviously, there is a tension between, I guess, output measures in terms of how much work is the service doing, and metrics, which is what is the impact on the city and the state of play in the city of the things that we're trying to influence. So, and kind of it's worth having those in somehow a single picture. So a better way of working out exactly what to put here and presenting it would be useful. On the presentation point, I just will comment. Obviously, you say red, amber, green. It's grey on the printed document as always. It's obviously in colour on the screen. If I look here, of course, it's in landscape, and so you have to peer a little bit. I did, we could. I did say, can we ask to have these printed in colour? And I was told immediately that colour printing on the lasers in the town hall is extremely expensive, even if it's only a tiny spot of colour, which seems wrong. Use a tiny amount of toner, it should be fine. But yeah, maybe we can think about that as well. But I do think we need to revisit some of these. I am struck that the waste management indicators are all green, and yet there is a strike on that is impacting the service quite substantially in terms of both drop collections and bring sites. And we look at this and we think, well, everything's fine. So there's clearly something wrong there. And yeah, I can make similar points about some of the other measures. Members, any comments from members on this, Mark?
Thanks. Just a couple of the white ones, and they have been picked up in briefings, but I think it's just worth kind of putting them on the record here. Actually, one very positive one, just to echo thanks that we've said before to Mosen and the team around the food safety, because I know there's an enormous amount of work has gone on there. The two white ones, page 260, the cancellation rate of PCNs, I think is something that we should come back to in a briefing and look into that. It says that there are monthly meetings. I'd like to understand a little bit more what's happening there. And then 266, something that we talked about on Wednesday, fly tipping numbers are increasing, and it's the quarter-on-quarter change over the last 2 years, quite interesting, and that it's always about the same amount each quarter is increasing. And I think it'd be useful to understand not just why that is, but how that ties into the strategy that we passed a few meetings ago.
Yes, I would echo that on the PCNs. I'm aware, officers will be aware, I'm not going to name it, I'm not going to name it, of a location where the signage relating to the parking restrictions is I think the Council of Woodcraft has raised it a number of times, so you'll be aware of what it is, where the signage is not adequate, and if PCNs are appealed, we don't contest them. So can we? And making the signage adequate is the job of the TRC committee. So we have a poor stat on our stats, but it's for TRC to fix. So perhaps we could ask them to do that. I'm getting nods. I'll take that as an agreement. Excellent. Sorry, whose hand did I see over here? Christine, yes, go on.
Thank you, Chair. I always talk about this. We don't really see on here how we're contributing to net zero in the city. I mean, all right, we see the amount of waste recycled and we can see the number of vehicles, but I just think it'd be nice to think about some of the measures. I know we're talking about getting solar panels on the Moor Market or something, so thinking about how we are looking at how we can reduce contributions to net zero and things in some of these measures would be helpful. That's all I want to say.
Very well, I'm not seeing any more hands. Is that all we want to say about the performance central Sue?
Yeah, sorry, it's just a thought really about, I was actually just looking at the waste management targets in particular, but it may apply to others. I just wonder whether it might be useful in the comments to have the equivalent figures where they can easily be accessed for comparator local authorities. You know, I mean, do we recycle more or less than other core cities, for example? I just think that might help us in focus on where we need to improve.
Just to respond on the waste management point of view, so on an annual basis, that is something we can do, but on a quarterly basis, that will be much more difficult because there's the audit, etc. that goes with it.
Yes, yeah, thank you for that. I mean, there's a number of measures here where we could say, well, are we measuring exactly the same thing? A lot of the highway stuff is, you know, are Amy doing the thing that's in the contract? And the answer is yes, they are. Well, I should hope so. The thornier questions are things like the Cat 2 potholes, which we do have regular reports on. You know, that is something that's a challenge that we obviously, yourselves working with Amy to try and reach an agreement on positive ways forward on that. Maybe we should have something like that in here. It means we would probably have some ambers, you know. And the same goes for other services. I've made comments before about licensing. You know, have the members receive their training isn't really you know, it's something we should expect to do. It's not. I'm not sure the value of reporting this to this committee is reported to the whips by all means. You know, if members have not had their training, but and I appreciate 3 of the whips are here, but the question for licensing is: are we meeting the licensing objectives? Are there any metrics that kind of represent how well licensing objectives are being met, and can we? Is there any sense of what our impact on those metrics is? I mean, and I appreciate these are difficult questions and they might be somewhat notional, but to me that's what performance means. All right, okay. So I think we could go over this. We could go over this again. We have this conversation every time to some extent, don't we? But can we for now agree this report? I'm getting nods. Thank you. Thank you. I'll take that report as agreed. That was the final item. So with that, I can close the meeting. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for those for watching at home. Sorry you had to wait for the repeat, for the rebroadcast. But that closes the final meeting of Not Wasting Street Scene. I'm not going to put a marathon into the pot. Environmental services and regulation. And if anybody can think of a snappy shorthand for that, then you can have the marathon when it comes in. I did think Easter egg would work, because Easter egg, but there's no T in services, unfortunately, so it didn't work. But otherwise, Easter egg would have been brilliant. All right, take care. Thank you for coming. See you next time. Bye-bye.